Okay, good morning. We're in Hemshech Ayin Beis, the bottom of 1149, 1150, in volume 2, but we've moved now to Tzadik Daled 5694, which is the same ideas in the same language of Ayin Beis. However, it is I'll make sure everybody's on mute. Okay, and however, it's the Frierdiker Rebbe taking Ayin Beis and elaborating upon it. So we're on page 85. The middle of chapter 20, and let's just sum up what we learned and continue. So we're discussing now a shita shlishis in the language of the Frierdiker Rebbe. It's called a third approach. A third approach in what? In explaining the two levels of ayin, that channel, that bridge, that interface between yesh amiti, the true reality, the source, God, yesh amiti, the true yesh, and absolute reality, and the yesh hanivra, the created reality. So the interface is called ayin. It divides into two. And then the third interpretation, the third shita is what? That they're both, he said, they're both in pnimi, in the immanent energy, the track of energy that God uses to permeate and enter internally and immanently in existence, not sevav kalam, that remains above and removed. In this immanent energy, there's also two levels. But pshitus, he says, the obvious way to explain these two levels is the kav. The kav is the pnimi. It's a ray of light, as we explained, like the stream of consciousness from a teacher to a student in the example. And it has a high point and it has a lower point. It's a kav, it's a line. The top of it associates and much connected to the Ein Sof, the Ein Sof, like he says in Eitz Chaim, Negeya v'Davuk, it touches and is attached. And the lower part that relates more and is subject to diminishment and relates more to existence. Now remember, this is all from Ayin Beis. So we learned these are the two levels of Ayin. The Frierdiker Rebbe, however, has not yet got to the Ayin. He's now discussing the Kav. So we're in the middle of an analysis of this Kav. And basically stating that the Kav, it's Inyan. That's what he calls it. Inyane shel Kav. These are the words. Inyan hamshachas hakav ulasis milo mata. That's always an important, when you hear the Amayim say the Inyan of something, then you know this is like its role, its function, its personality. What is it? To create milo mata. Basically structure. To create higher and lower. Milo mata is just a term for the levels and structure of space, a hierarchy, something higher, something lower. There's no higher, there's no lower. In the eagle as well, in a circle, what's the top and what's the bottom of a circle? It's all one flow. It's a symbol of infinity, actually. You can't say the top of the circle is here and the bottom is here. It's one thing. In a line, you can say there's the top and there's the bottom. So Milo Mata is what the Kav creates. That being that the Kav touches so-called Ein Sof, meaning it relates to at its high point, at its top point. So that whatever relates to that is Mila, is higher. Whatever is more distant from the source is considered lower. Okay. Good. Good. And then he added that this is not just due to miyut, ribuya miyut, meaning more and less, diminished light or less light. That would be more of a quantitative shift. But there's actually a fundamental difference. The structure of existence, as we spoke, or Chochmah and Bina and Keser, Chochmah, Bina. These are not just different levels of light. One has more light and one has less energy. These are actually fundamentally different because the Kav also is, besides the diminishment, he says, it's be'etzem madregosa. His chalkus be'etzem madregosa. That was the next point. And he explained that the Kav itself has that instruction in it, within it, and therefore, just reading closer to the bottom of page 84, that kim hu dargish chalukas be'etzem madrigosam lachein hine gam amaylo mata she'eso hu gam kem Hashem chalukim be'etzem madrigosam. So the kav is not just a regulator of light. It's not just like a let's call it like a filter, not a filter. What do they call a regulator? You know, like something you put in front of a projector that controls and regulates the flow. More light, less light. It's much more than that. The kav is actually it has the instructions, the DNA, if you wish, of the actual structure of Chochmah, Bina, Keser, and so on. Okay. And then he goes on that how is it possible that the Kav can do this? He says it's through the Tzimtzum. Because the Tzimtzum creates that leap from a state of shapeless and seamless energy, Lifnei Tzimtzum. The Tzimtzum creates a leap. Now there is space. He says the words are that this chalkus, he says like this, that the ma'alamata v'chalkus hazeh the ma'alamata ba'akav atzma yo'adei tzimtzum, through the tzimtzum, because the tzimtzum created a leap in light. Shaloi b'hadraga, the light was not in a regular flow, and that caused the ability to have chalkus ba'er. As I discussed, it either reveals this chalkus that God intended before the tzimtzum, or it actually creates it. And here again, this chalkus is not ribuy and miyut alone. It's not more and less, but be'etzem madregosam, an actual difference of different diverse entities. And now, to understand this is all the Frierdiker Rebbe's addition. He's now going to go into a deeper discussion of this issue of his chalkus. Because now that we've established that the Kav creates this structure through the Tzimtzum, basically the Tzimtzum and the Kav together. Because remember, the Tzimtzum itself creates the space for structure because it conceals whatever was there before, which was shapeless and seamless. But it's the Kav that actually implements it, because Tzimtzum alone is just darkness. It's just a concealer. You need a Kav. Tzimtzum is the teacher concealing all his intelligence, so now there can be his chalkus as he speaks the difference to his students. But he needs a kav, which is the flow of consciousness, where he says, okay, let's learn. Ayin Beis, whatever it is that's being Bereshis bara l'kimus hashamayim v'sa'aretz. This is the kav speaking, but post Tzimtzum, so you have all the ingredients for his chalkus. But to understand this better, the Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe, steps back and says, 1 second. The lechera ain't a move on. We're going to go up to the question, and we're going to go to the Pardus's answer, and then how the Frierdiker Rebbe says does not suffice. So it comes a big question here. Chera ain't a move on. Since Ein Sof is echad hapashut, which means one, a shapeless oneness, not one and not two, a shapeless oneness. It's a utter unity, indivisible, unified field of energy, of divine energy. So how can from that come ribuy and ischalkus, a multitude and distinctions? How can shapelessness and seamlessness lead to some form of shape and structure of different from one many? So he brings now the answer of the Pardus. I'm just going to sum up what we learned. The Pardus is the bottom of page 84 and top of 85. The Pardus of the Ramak answers, Shar Dalet Perek Dalet, Gate 4, Chapter 4. He says this chalkus does not come from the Echad HaPoshet. The Echad HaPoshet, no, my mistake. I'm correcting myself. That's not what he says. He says this chalkus is only in the eyes of the beholder due to the kelim. So the Echad HaPoshet remains indivisible and shapeless, but it's the kelim that create the appearance of structure. And he gives the example of the sun. The sun shines. It's a shapeless, colorless light, but it's now shining through the panes of glass of a window. When it shines through many different windows, with different glass, colored, tinted glass. He got white, red, green. So what happens? If you're standing on this side of the glass, the observer, to the eyes of the observer, you see colors. You see different colors, even though top of 85. This change, meaning the change of color, one color from another, white, red, green, was not assumed. It's not, what did I say? It does not, it does not become, not assumed by the light. The light doesn't acquire. The light does not acquire these colors. You can't say the light of the sun has now become red, white, red, or green, because the light remains. If you see the light without the windows, the light remains the same color, colorless. Okay. It's only due to what we see. Says the Pardes, that the Eir manifests in containers. The containers are like the windows, the tinted glass. The Eir is like the sun, uncolored, colorless. So Nira Lagaba Nivroim. So Lagaba Nivroim, which means the Ayin Areya, we, the creatures, the creation, looks at it. We see it Kafi Govern Hakeli. We see according to the color of the container. But the Eir Mitzadatz Mehu Pashat. But the Eir on its own is Pashat. So that's the Pardes answer. The Eir is Pashat. It's shapeless, colorless, seamless. Harz Ribeis Chalkus is due to the eyes of the beholder through the Eir coming into the Kelim. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, and here's where we stopped. We'll continue. Ach, be'emes ein ze tirutz maspik. However, in truth, this is not a sufficient answer. He doesn't say ein ze tirutz. He doesn't say it's not an answer at all. He says not enough. It's not sufficient. Maspik. Why? The zeh shayech lemata. This answer, you can say below, shakelim heimedover b'fniatzma min masha betechem. This applies in the example, it works well. The kelim are a separate entity from what they carry or what they channel, what's inside them. The eina keli heira al masha betecha. And the keli, therefore, does not indicate, is not an indicator of what's inside it. In other words, the keli can be a colored glass, white, red, or green. It's not indicator. It's not the same. It's not the same thing as the light. It's a separate entity, and the keli does not have to indicate what's inside it. Meaning, this colorless light that's shined through the glass or the air through the keli does not have to indicate. The keli does not have to be consistent with it. So that's why it can show you the one who looks from this through the keli sees a color, even though there is no real color in the light. So he's basically going to explain that the mashal is not like the nimshal. In the mashal, it works. The glass is not the light of the sun. It's a separate entity. And therefore, it can give us the appearance of, therefore, it gives the appearance of a color. But the light does not indicate what's really coming through. I'm sorry, the keli does not indicate of what it contains within it. So what it contains within it is really achdus, but the keli gives the impression of color or different schalkus. So in addition to the fact that it doesn't indicate what's inside, it also has no relationship to what's inside it. The glass, going back to the mashal, the window pane that's colored has no relationship with the sun. It just happens to be a type of, what do we call it? Not a partition, like a. No, there's a sun would shine without it. It's not. It has no relationship with the sun. All it's doing is creating a color.
Filter.
I used filter before. That's one word. I'm looking for another word. I'm trying to find a filter, a film, maybe. Okay. So it doesn't indicate what's inside the keli. Remember, when it comes to a window, you don't say inside the keli, it's shining through the keli, the window. But it's the same idea. The keli does not indicate what's inside. It has no relationship at all with what is within it. The eris and kelim. V'gam yitaken lemer, shageven hu b'mikra. Third point that Friedrich Rebbe is saying. It's also possible to say, that the color is just incidental. It's nothing significant about it. It's incidental. Ubarak mitzad keli. In other words, it has nothing to do with the sun. The sunlight, or whatever light is shining through the keli, let's talk about the mashal. The sunlight doesn't care whether it's going through a colored window or not. It's not relevant to the sun. The whole thing is just, okay, you happen to have a red window or a green window or a white. So it's assuming a color to the eye of the beholder, but has nothing to do with the light itself. It's completely b'mikra, meaning incidental. It's only due to the container. Nothing significant about it. What does that mean in the nimshal of the pardes? That through a keli, he's saying that that there's no question achdus and eschalkus. Why? Because the remains achdus. The keli does not indicate on that. The keli has no relationship with it, and the keli is just incidental. That's the way the pardes says it. Says the Friedrich Rebbe. So the Friedrich Rebbe is explaining that this is not a sufficient answer because you can only say this below. He's still not going to say the kol zeh. All this lo yitaken klala, it is v'kelim ruchnim. All these elements that we just said about the how the keli affects the eir are not applicable on eris and kelim ruchnim, on spiritual, on ethereal lights and containers. This works in a physical sense. Like I said, the panes of glass are colored, the light is not, and how it impacts, because they have no relationship with one another, meaning the keli and the oir. But you can't say that on eris and kelim ruchnim. Gam k'moshehem b'keiches hanefesh. Not only l'mayla and atzilus and the elim yisraelyenim, but also in the faculties of the soul, b'klei hameach v'klei haseichel. You also can't say. Remember, eris v'kelim we learned originates l'mayla. It's the spheres. Eir hachachma and the klei hachachma. Eir habina in the keli of bina. What is it in the keiches hanefesh that nishtalshelu mehem? Like he says in Tanya, these are the keiches hanefesh. The eir ha-riyah, the power of sight in the eye, the power of shmi, of listening in the ear, the power of intelligence in the brain. So the eir is the power, the faculty, the soul's faculty, and the keli is the physical body where that faculty resides. So Friedrich Rebbe is saying now that the part that says, not only is it not applicable in Ruchnius, even in Keiches HaNefesh, like he says, but also in the faculties, you can't say that. In other words, saying basically that the faculty is shapeless and it's the container that creates vision, the distinction between seeing and hearing and conceiving and feeling and walking and talking. He's going to explain why. The kol ze lo yitaken, b'klei hameach v'klei haseichel. Well, he doesn't say why. He just says you can't say that. In other words, you can't just say it's one flow of energy. And the truth is that seeing and hearing is only like a color of glass. It's incidental, has no relationship with, and does not indicate on the eir at all. You can't say that because the eir pnimi, the eir and keli, are commensurate with each other. They're tailored for each other. Like let's say saying as a teacher teaches an idea, we spoke about, it's not like the teacher's ideas are all shapeless like Pri Tzimtzum. It's all part of his brilliance. And the only thing is he's able to manipulate, or he's able to create different filters that the ideas flow to this child, it's Ayin Beis, to this student, it's Mishnah, ben Chamish lemikra, ben Esther lemishnah. There's no real difference. It's all one light. It's one intelligence. You can't say that. You have to say the energy is also different, not just the containers. The containers, according to the mashal, are just an incidental factor. Like you said, b'mikra, and they have no relationship. In Eir and Keli, and even in Keichus HaNefesh, he says, the Eir and Keli speak to each other. The Keli is not some side show. Umakolshkein, let's finish reading, and then I'll explain more. Umakolshkein be'eres v'kelim shelamayla, be'eses firas datzilis. And for sure, how much more so, when you're talking about the lights and containers, lamayla, and the 10 spheres of Atzilus. The itmar bahu, about which we have learned. Itmar bahu, we've learned. What do we have learned about these 10 spheres in Atzilus? Or itmar means it's taught about them. Iyu v'chayu ichad, iyu v'garmu ichad. Ihu, meaning God, godliness. V'chayui, God and his energy, ihu, you. And chayui, and your energy, your light, is one. You, ihu, v'garmui, you and your containers are one. Garmui sometimes is sometimes like a skeleton, like the bones. But it means also kalim, eris and kalim. So the Zohar says, Tikkun Zohar says, ihu v'chayu ichad, ihu v'garmu ichad, u'kamesha kosev v'mokam acher barucha. As it's explained and written about elsewhere at length. So what are you talking about here? That the divine is one with the energies, the divine is one with the containers. So you can't say the containers are some outside show. You could say that about panes of glass in this physical world. The sunlight, that remains shapeless and one, and colorless. And it's the glass that has it. But here the glass, the containers, Lamaila, and even the Keichus HaNefesh are part of the same process. They're part of the divine process. They're not a secondary factor. Imkain, if that's the case, Imkain l'cheira hadar kushi l'duchta. So seemingly the question returns to what it was initially. What was the question? Eich nesavu hakelim min ha'atzmus yisbarach v'yasala. It only carried over the question. The Ramak's answer does not answer the question sufficiently. Because now the question is, so how did this chalkus of the kalim come from? So I think he's saying 2 points here that's, I think, important to emphasize. Number one, this works well because the sun and the glass and the colored tinted glass, the tinted windows, don't have any relationship. So, so you put the sun and tinted windows, obviously you're going to get a color, and the sun remains colorless. But what happens if the sun created the tinted windows? It's coming from the same divine source. The kalim are not where they come from. So to say that the chalkus comes as only in the impression of the eye, number one, God, who created the kalim? Who created the windows that way? So back to the same question, Achdus Hapshuta, how did you get the distinction? Good, you could say the Eir remains Pashut. What about the Kalim? That I think is the key point he's making here. But also from the language, it sounds like that the Kali is also connected to the Eir. You can't just say how, in other words, the question is let me articulate what I want to say. Once you say that the Kalim are one with the Eir. One second, let me just see a second. Yeah, that the Eir and the Keli are related to one another, then you still have a problem. It's one thing when you say they're not related. Okay, so you brought in a foreign entity that created color to the eyes of the observer when there's really no color in the essence of the Eir. That you could say with sunlight and panes of window. But you can't say with Eiris and Keli Lamaila and even in Keichus HaNefesh that the Eir and Keli do not have a relationship, that the Keli does not indicate on the Eir, the Keli has no relationship with the Eir, and the Keli is just incidental. There's three things that he said. You could say Lamata, you can't say Lamaila. So that's problem number one. So you haven't really answered the question. The second thing is, the question still carries over. Even if you're going to explain it some way or another, where do the Kalim come from? They come also from the divine unity. So, Eich Nesavu HaKelim in Atzmus Yisbarach. So what'd you say? You told me the answer is that the colors is what creates the Chalkus. But the colors come from the Kalim. Who created the Kalim? So the same question, how did Achdus create Kalim? Okay, those are the 2 points I think he's making here. He doesn't say it as 2 points, but from the whole case he first built about Eris and Kalim working with each other, or are they separate entities, and now saying that the Kalim, this thing, I think they're not really 2 different points. I'm just breaking it as 2 different parts of this argument. So the question, bottom line, remains intact. How did his chalkus happen? What caused his chalkus to happen? So Eichen Esavu HaKelim in Atzmus Yisbarach v'Yasala. I'll tell you what I'm trying to get at. Now he's suddenly brought back Mina Atzmus. He's not saying from the Oyer. Till now we're talking Oyer and Keli. So you're talking about the Oyer and the Keli having a relationship. Now he's going back to how the Kalim came in the first place. Anyway, let's continue on. We'll go back to spell it all out. Im Kein L'Cheri, okay. Shezeu Isavus HaRibui Me'echad HaPoshet. Kalim is a ribui, because we know Kalim have distinction. So this is the creation of a multitude, of number of a many, from one shapeless or seamless oneness.
What do you see b'koiches ruchnim shebenefesh? How do you see there that they are wanting the eros on the kelim? Klei hamoyach, klei haseichel.
Because you cannot say that the eye and the power of vision, that the eye just happens to be a filter and has no relationship with the power of vision. Because the Keli and the Eir absolutely affect each other and relate to each other. In other words, it's not just one soul energy going into the body, and the physical eye happens to turn it into vision, and the ear turns it into sound. So in other words, you say that really it's all like one, it's like water flowing, and the water is going into different parts of the body, because the way Koyach Hariyah works is that it works closely with the eye. For example, when a person exercises their muscles, they actually get more energy. The klei hamoyach, then when you refine the physical mind, you eat proper foods and other things, so the mind works better. So you cannot say the keli is incidental. The sun doesn't work better when it goes through a red window or a blue or a white window a tint, or a red one or a green one. The sun and light and the keli have no relationship at all with each other. Like you said, the keli is not meira, does not indicate on the energy. The keli does not have a relationship with the light, the window, and the keli does not, it could even be incidental. It's completely irrelevant. You cannot say that when you say keiches hanefesh, you'd have to say the eye has no relationship with the power of vision. It doesn't indicate on the power of vision. It's not correct. Because if the case would be that the fact is that the keli of the eye is shaped very much in a way that's a keli for koyach hariyah. The ear cannot be koyach, you can't see through your ears. So we learned at length in volume 1 that the keiches hanefesh are eres pnimim for that reason. The ear fits the keli. An eir makif would not have a relationship with the keli. The chayes hanefesh, the fact that the human being, can everybody mute because there's sound coming from somewhere? The fact that the chayes hanefesh, like we learned earlier, that the life force is equal from head to toe, from the head to the toenail. That's an equal. Everything is alive. But to say the keiches are the same way, you see that it's not that way. There's a lot of arguments. If you go back to volume 1, chapter 6 and on, or actually earlier, chapter 2 and on, he talks about this at length. And I'll say one more thing. If the case would be that the Keli and the Eir have no relationship, then like with Chayas, if God forbid someone gets weak, the Chayas is not impacted by the specifics. Life force is a life force. Your toe is just as alive as your head. When it comes to Keiches, you can have a Koyach that's weaker and another Koyach is not weaker. So if it was all based on the flow of energy, everything should get weak. If the light is not going properly, I'm sorry, if the Kelim, if it was all due to the if the Eir and the Keli don't commensurate with each other, then it's just an Eir. If the Eir is flowing, everything should work. If the Eir is not flowing, nothing should work well. The fact of the matter is, you see that a person could have one Koyach is working very well, another Koyach is not working well. So you have to say that the Keli and the Eir are much more related to each other. There's a lot more to say about this. But the point being is, he's saying you cannot say that it's like the sun and the windows, like it is Lamata, that the Eir and the Keli have no relationship with each other in the ultimate sense of the word. The mashal of the, so bottom line, we're back to the question, how from Achdus, Echad HaPoshet comes many.
Can we ask make a comment, question at this point?
Sure.
Electricity, the power source, runs 1 million different types of machines. It's a Pashat Koach.
Is it Pashat, first of all?
Is it Pashat? It's a Beshitas that the same energy runs everything.
Okay, but it doesn't create everything. The point here is, how is the creation from oneness? Energy, electricity does not create appliances.
No.
Energy only energizes appliances.
But it
The
works.
issue we have here is that you have a shapeless, seamless oneness of the divine. So what created structure? With electricity, electricity doesn't create a refrigerator or light bulbs. Electricity energizes them.
Right, of course. So that, but that doesn't it's not Shovil, what the Ramak says. It could still remain.
But we're talking, but the question is here is, he's saying, who created the distinction of one Keli to the other? One appliance from another? It can be electricity. Electricity doesn't create.
Okay, right. Okay, fine. But my question is what the Rebbe is saying.
That's what he's saying. He's saying Lamaila, you could say this Lamata. Lamata, you could say you have sunlight and you have Kelim that have no relationship. So the Keli creates distinction, Chischalkus, and the sunlight is colorless. But who created the distinctions? The Kelim. How'd they come to be? The Kelim are related to the Eir, and they're what made this distinction in the first place.
Okay, so we have to target. So we in that case, in the case of the Ramak, we would have to target why Kelim are different, and that the Or can remain.
That's why he says the answer is not maspik.
Okay, good.
We'll go back to it. What does he mean by it's not enough? And what does the Pardes mean? Let's see what he's going to answer. And then we'll go back to understand the different perspectives on this matter.
Gotcha. Good.
I made the case before that there's two elements to this. One is that the Keli and the Eir are much more have a relationship in Lamaila and the Keiches HaNefesh, where you can't say that Lamata. Lamata, it's not the case. And the second thing, what he says at the end, that at the end of the day, how did from Echad HaPoshet, from Atzmus, how did Nisava Kelim? So even according to the Ramak, who created the Kelim? Didn't it come from Achdus Apshuta too?
I would say, if I could, along Yecheskel's line there, that's what I've been thinking, that especially in today's world, the Ramak's example of the light and the glass, colored glass, but really in our society, in our times, you can see that you can have the same battery. One battery, you buy a battery in the store, and you can put a battery in a vessel that can, a robot that can use that battery to see something. You can put it in a stereo to make music and to hear something, or an audio thing that could hear, a tape recorder. You can put that same pushes of energy, as Yecheskel was saying, and put it in, it's really the kalim that can take this simple same ore that the battery can be used in all different kind of kalim, and produce totally different functionality, like the eyes can see and the ears can hear. So while the battery is the same, it's the same ore. So the question that you're asking, Rabbi Jacob, seems like, then who creates his chalkos and the kalim? But I would think that's the possible answer there, is that the kalim, as I understand it, come from the Rishima, and which is a different source, so to speak, which I don't know how the relationship there is. I haven't learned it, but why wouldn't the answer make sense that according to the Ramak, the energy is ba'achtis, is in his chalkos. It's only when it comes into the kalim, into relationship with the kalim, which there is his chalkos, and how that's created, I don't know. But it's not an ore. The ore remains pashut. The kalim may have to take that battery, that same ore, and through his chalkos in the kalim, they're able to derive different functionality, completely different functionality, so that the actual his chalkos comes only from the kalim and not from the ore.
You heard what I answered already. I already answered. What you're saying doesn't make any sense to what he's saying here. The bottom line is, you just said in your own words, I don't know how this chalkus came. That's what the question is. The question is not whether the Eir and Keli, do me a favor, mute because there shouldn't be background. The question was not about Eiris and Kalim. The question is about how Achdus creates his chalkus. The Ramak is trying to answer that this chalkus comes from the Kalim. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Kalim, you can't say that. In the mashal, it works. Electricity, it works. But electricity doesn't create Kalim. Electricity energizes containers. The question is how his chalkus came from. That's the question here, not about Eiris and Kalim. This is not a discussion of Eir and Keli here. This is a discussion of Achdus and his chalkus. How shapeless, seamless oneness, where did chalkus come from? So the fact that you answer that it comes from Kalim, and it's only in the eyes of the beholder, like with the colors, does not answer the question, because then the question is, who created the Kalim? How did the Kalim come from? That's the most basic reason the part of this answer does not suffice. In addition, I was saying that even the issue with Eir and Keli, you can't just say Lamaila. Lamato with a sun and windows. The windows have no relationship with the sun. Kalim and Eir have much closer and more symbiotic relationship. As he said, even in Keichas HaNefesh. Since they have a much more of a relationship, that only makes the question stronger. So the fact you just said, okay, you know what, we stuck in some windows that are colors, that's how you got his chalkus. The whole diversity of this universe is not real. It's like someone stuck in colored windows. So you created the eyes of the beholder, it seems like it's diverse, when in truth it's all one. So first of all, you can't say that. That's not a good enough answer, because one, who created the Kalim? And second, the Kalim and the Eir are not incidentally related. The Kalim are connected to the Eir in a very deep way. So all that tells you that Ramak's answer is not sufficient in answering the question from Achdus to his chalkus. Electricity doesn't change anything. First of all, as I said, electricity, yes, can be shapeless, and it goes into different appliances, no problem. But electricity doesn't create appliances. Don't forget that key point here. Electricity is just energizing them. If electricity, one shapeless energy, suddenly created millions and billions of different structures, you'd have the same question. How could a shapeless energy create a different, all these diverse entities? That's the question on the table here.
I would think that the Ramak would answer, could answer.
What's that? Are you trying to defend the Ramak when the Frierdiker Rebbe is asking the question? He didn't give his answer yet. He said it's not a sufficient. He's not a sufficient answer. Listen, you could try to explain the Ramak. Go ahead. You want to explain the Ramak? Go ahead.
I don't want to explain. I just want to say that
answer the question.
I don't. Yeah.
No. What's that? How does the Ramak answer the question? How did many different Kalim? Who created the colors? How did oneness create many colors? What's your answer to that?
I would answer that the Kav. There's two things. Potential answer. I don't know the answer, but a potential logical answer.
Say that. 1 second. The Ramak says about colored glass. He says that's the answer. But so I'm asking, what's the answer? How did the colors? Who created the colored glass?
So where did the glass come from? So the question is, I would think that they might answer that the ore is coming from the Kav, and the Kalim, the glass, is coming from the Rishima. And the Rishima has a different.
The Ramak doesn't say that. He doesn't say that. You're adding new ideas from other places. The Ramak doesn't even hint to it. By the way, the Ramak doesn't even talk about a kav and a rishima, just for the record. It's all Arizal's language. That's number one. Number two, you're bringing other ideas, not from the Ramak. So what do why don't we hear what the Frierdiker Rebbe has to say? You're bringing,
right.
you're bringing explanations that have nothing to do with the Ramak. The Ramak didn't say kav and didn't say rishima. He should have said that. That is two powers of God. One is the power of Achdus, and one is the power of the Keach HaGvul. He doesn't say that. He says, he gave an example, and the Frierdiker Rebbe says the answer is not sufficient. Are you asking a question why the answer is not sufficient, or are you trying to explain the Ramak?
I was trying to explain.
But the Frierdiker Rebbe says the answer is,
part.
one second. The Frierdiker Rebbe said the answer is not sufficient. You're saying to me the answer is sufficient?
No, because I should
You're also
listen to
bringing in, one
the
second. But Eliezer, you're also bringing additional explanation. The Ramak's answer, the Frierdiker Rebbe says, is not sufficient. You're bringing kav and rishimu, which means that you also agree it's not sufficient and you need new explanations to add to it. He doesn't say any of that.
I hear you. Okay, that's good. It's additional. The Rishima is a potentially critical aspect of this discussion, which I don't know if it's right now.
Has nothing to do. One second. Are you processing, or we're learning a mimer from the Frierdiker Rebbe? You bringing? Did he even mention Rishima? Why are you even bringing Rishima into here?
Correct. You're right. I should listen to the entire explanation of the Frierdiker Rebbe before I can come in with my question.
Yeah. And remember, the same question can be asked about the Rishimu. If the Rishimu has structure, who created? How does unity translate? How does a shapeless, seamless oneness, indivisible, become even a Rishimu? That's also the same question. Okay. Ach be'emes. So the Frierdiker Rebbe now is going to say, however, in truth, less pircha klal miikara. There's no question in the first place. The whole question is eliminated in the first place. There's no question in the first place. Miikara means it's not a question as an answer. There's no question in the first place how many and schalkus and diversity came from atzmus. Why? The atzmus gufa machriach inyan hariboy ve'eschalkus. Atzmus itself compels us to compels the idea of multitude and diversity. Ukanal, like we learned earlier, the inyan atzmus lo yutur v'lo yugder b'shum dover. Atzmus is not defined and not confined, you can say, not shaped or not describable, not defined and not limited in any way, in any given way. Nothing defines it. And it was explained earlier, this is a while back in Tzadik Dalet, that which we call and we describe God with the name Boira, creator, that's not a description. It's not a description. We're not trying to describe God. Atzmus. You can't describe Atzmus. The only reason we use it is to say because creation indicates that there's a creator, that there's an Atzmus. But not that Atzmus is defined by being a creator. So Boira is a word that only Atzmus can be a creator. But not that Atzmus is defined by being a creator. Because he's much more than that, and he's beyond that. Because he's not defined, period. All this we learned, if you want to know the page, I'll give it to you. It's a while back when he talked about Atzmus. Chapter 14, page 38 and 39. Earlier as well, I believe. I'm just looking for a second. Yeah. So he's going back to the nature, the definition that the Atzmus is not defined in any possible way, even the word Boira. Moyer, he said for sure not. But he said Boira also, Loize kol Atzmus mashenivra memena elamis. V'neisen lanu musag, so therefore the word Boira, creation, indicating on a creator, gives us some concept, but Eifan HaMetzias, the Mechuyev HaMetzias. It gives us some concept in the way something that must exist exists. Because if for example, Oyer without Atzmus cannot create Yesh Ma'ayin. Oyer could only express itself through Oyer, because it's defined by Oyer. When you see a creation that does not have anything that indicates where it came from, you have to say that it tells us something about the one who created it. Like he says in Ageres HaKedesh, from that we learn Mitziyusei Matzmusei, because only Mitziyusei Matzmusei can create something that it itself does not indicate on any source. Oyer can't do that because Oyer has a source. It can never do something that is against its own personality. The fact that God could create, the fact that something could be created that does not have an indicator of a creator in any defined way, tells us that Atzmos, the creator, has that element, that he's a true reality, Mechuyev HaMetzias and Mitzvus Atzmus, as we learned earlier. Why he's bringing that aspect, I'm not so sure, but the key what he wants to say is that God is not definable in any possible way, even by the word creator. Okay. Ki Atzmus lo yatur b'shum teyar v'geder. Atzmus is not defined by any toyar, by any description and geder, parameter. I'd say description and parameter. V'hainu, which means shu pshitus betachlis. Utter shapelessness, utter lack of definition. Nothing defines it. Nothing. No parameter. No, you can't say it's this and not that. That means pshitus betachlis. It's not one and not many. It's completely undefined. You can't even say that God is one, because that already is telling you it's one and not two. So it's utter shapelessness, utter seamlessness. V'apshitus amiti machriach gam inyan hariboy ve'eschalkus. Okay, this is going to be an interesting, deep concept. And true pshitus, not pshitus that negates. If you say pshitus, shapelessness that negates shape, yeah, then the question is, how does shape come from shapelessness? But pshitus amiti, that negates shapelessness and negates shape and negates that it's not, you can't even say it's shapeless as opposed to being shaped. So he's saying this pshitus machriach compels also a multitude and diversity. Let me explain. Let me see if he explains this. I'm not sure if he's going to explain. In other words, the question, how could many come from one, is only if one is a contradiction to many. So yes, the oneness that we usually understand, if it's one, it's not many.
He is explaining it right now from our Ayin Beis.
He doesn't explain. He just, Ayin Beis is just a statement that there's the Keich HaGvul. I'm explaining why is it machriach. It's machriach because God is not defined by oneness, and he's not defined by shapelessness. So the fact that he's beyond any definition tells you that he can manifest and can choose to manifest in no definition, in oneness, in shapelessness, but he can also manifest in shape and in structure. And that's what he continues. U'kamaymer Avedis HaKedesh. Like the Maimon of Avedis HaKedesh. written by Ibn Gabai. What was his first name? Not Shmuel. Not Yosef.
Meir.
Meir Ibn Gabai, right. Meir Ibn Gabai, a great Kabbalist in, I think, the 12th or 13th century. Da Ein Sof hu shlemus bli shum chesaron. Ein Sof is complete without any lack. Nothing is lacking. Valkain yesh beigam keach hagvuli. And that's why he also has the power of creating limits, gvul. She'im temer, this is the words of the Vedas Shekesh, because if we will say, sheyesh lekeich bebilti bal gvul, then he has the power in the infinite. The ein lekeich begvul, and does not have the power in the finite, ata mechaser shlemuse. You basically diminish, and you're saying that he's missing something. He's unable, he's not his completeness is limited. It's limited only in bli gvul, not gvul. Keich hagvul. So the Frierdiker Rebbe now saying we could apply the same logic to riboy and eschalkus. V'chein hu be'inya riboy ve'eschalkus. The same with multitude and diversity. K'moshe Kosev HaMaral Zal b'Agdamosa l'Sefer Gvuras Hashem. The Maral writes in his introduction to Gvuras Hashem, it's one of his Sfarim, Maral of Prague, Da Atzmus liyese poshet amiti, Atzmus, being completely poshet amiti, the true, shapeless, completely undefined. The Eina Mugder b'shum geder, and he's not confined in any parameter. Yochel is taif memenu. Dafka from this atzmus, from him can branch out or can extend. Gam hariboy ve'eschalkus. Also the multitude and the diversity. She'im temer, because if we say she'ena yochel is taif memenu hariboy ve'eschalkus, that from him cannot come, cannot extend, it's like a sif, taif, can extend a multitude and a diversity. So then you've applied upon him and you're imposing on him gvul and agdora, limit and parameter. And that would mean that he's not poshet amiti, that he's not completely undefined without limits and parameters. But due to the utter undefined nature, meaning undefined even by the word undefined, you have to say that his capacity is in every possible way. He can do anything. He's going to continue in the next chapter to explain what kol yachol means. He can do anything. So the question that was asked, how do you get from achdus to ischalkus? He says the question in the first place is not there. Because we misunderstood what achdus is. God is not one and not many. God is not even defined by oneness. He's beyond it all. And therefore, just as the power to manifest in bli gvul, it can manifest in gvul, in keich hagvul, keich habli gvul, keich hagvul, same thing. He also compels that he can manifest in ribui and ischalkus. So really, it's a keich ha'atzmus that's creating ischalkus, not kelim. And that keich ha'atzmus has the power to create which is shapeless, and the power to create kelim. Now, we haven't finished. There's more to come. And we're going to go back to the pardes, because this is going to, you'll see how the pardes still fits in. That's why I said tiritz ein maspik, because the pardes does answer somewhat the question, but not at the root. At the root, the question, he says, ultimately is not a question, because Atzmus has that power. And it's true, the Ramak and even the Arizal did not really speak about Atzmus. They're speaking in Ishtalshlus, they're explaining it as best as you can, the Ramak in Ishtalshlus. But we'll get back to that. Meanwhile, so this is all coming to explain, we didn't even get back to the Kav and the Kalim and the Ischalkus of the Kav, that the Kav creates Milo Mato. But we'll get back to that. So we'll stop here at the end of chapter 20 on page 85.